All right, kids, as of me writing this, there was yet another mass shooting in America, where we averaged more than one per day. And while I'm not going to go into detail about this one in particular, statistically, there will be another one tomorrow. Just know that clearly a gun got in the hands of the wrong person. Well, the darkness that is mass shootings tends to overshadow the fact that most firearm deaths are suicide, and mass shootings are a fraction of homicides committed by gun. Yet, they do shed light on the many gun problems we have in this country, and the talking heads who say that now is not the time to talk about guns somehow, and politicians saying that they don't want to politicize it some way. But this year, for the lawmakers who don't want to do anything about guns, or at the very least finding different ways to say it, outside of thoughts and prayers.
It's a horrible, horrible situation, and we're not going to fix it. Criminals are going to be criminals, and my daddy fought in the Second World War, fought in the Pacific, fought the Japanese, and he told me, he said, buddy, he said, if somebody wants to take you out and doesn't mind losing their life, there's not a whole heck of a lot you can do about it.
Certain of their tools that they're using would be infringements upon the people's right to keep and bear arms, upon their constitutional rights, upon due process, upon other things.
That registering is an infringement?
Yes.
So you're not going to like my answer. And look, I'm going to say that straight up. It's not about this one gun. If there is a firearm out there that you're comfortable being shot with, please show me which one it is. There's not, right there. Every single gun in the hands of a crazy person, a deranged person, a convicted felon, every single, you could ban that specific gun, and you are going to do almost nothing to improve y'all's safety. I'm sorry, that's a fact. It is.
That's lawmakers pretty much saying gun laws don't work, which is what we're going to talk about today. Let's politicize it. And before I continue, as you'll see, I'm not going to suggest any bans on guns. Politicians and pundits alike will say that bans don't work either, except for, of course, in the halls of Congress, at Trump rallies, Turning Point USA events, and NRA conventions. How does that work? Meanwhile, a Senator Ted Cruz will say gun laws take firearms out of the hands of law-abiding citizens, with no proof. Not even Clinton's assault weapons ban from 1994 confiscated guns from anybody. Neither did Biden's gun safety legislation from last year. I guess an example of guns being taken out of the hands of law-abiding citizens would be gun-free zones. Signed into law in November of 1990 by President George H.W. Bush, the Gun-Free School Zone Act of 1990 prohibits unauthorized people from carrying firearms on school grounds. Later, the Gun-Free Schools Act of 1994, enacted under President Bill Clinton, focused on preventing students from bringing firearms on school grounds. According to the BBC, gun-free zones are an idea that leaves both sides of the gun debate unsatisfied. Firearm rights activists believe they don't work and may encourage violent criminals and discourage a good guy with a gun, the law-abiding citizen. Gun control advocates see gun-free zones largely as a half measure that is of little help in a nation awash in gun violence. The thing is, we don't really know how many gun-free zones there are, and there's really no research on whether or not they actually work. And before I continue, are the people who blame school shootings, for example, on gun-free zones and mental illness suggesting that a person with, say, an AR-15 and mental illness, don't forget about that, is stopping to read signs and check laws either way? Either way? Crazy business. Anyways, the gun laws don't work argument usually heads to Chicago. It goes a little something like this. Illinois has some of the most strict gun laws, yet gun crime is out of control there. And I've not only talked about black on black crime multiple times before, that term seems to come out of Chicago in the early 70s, but I've also talked about Chicago's guns and where they come from. 20% are by way of Indiana. Now, Kevin Downey Jr. here, seen looking like he refuses to let flock of seagulls down, wondered if Indiana is to blame for Chicago's gun violence, why isn't Indianapolis a war zone too? Good question. And in his article, even though he admits that 1 year in 2021, Indianapolis beat Chicago, but now it's business as usual again, I want him to know that Indianapolis also beat Chicago when it came to homicide rate in 2019 as well. That same year, according to the FBI, South Bend, Indiana was ranked 47th out of 65 cities with the highest homicide rate, behind Chicago at 28, sure, but they're on the short list. More on Chicago later. Actually, several cities in the state of Indiana have issues with homicide. Fort Wayne, Indiana also has issues because of state law. And According to Everytown's analysis of FBI data, the cities with the highest gun homicide rates in 2020 were all in states with lax gun laws. And there's Gary, Indiana. This came out a month before Kevin Downey Jr. wrote his article. Speaking of Everytown research, we're going to focus on states' gun laws because
no matter how you spin it, there's only one solution for this problem. If you want to say shootings are caused by mental health, then look, this is the suicide rate and here's school shootings. There is absolutely no correlation between suicide rate and school shootings. This is drug overdose rate, another sign of mental health. No correlation between school shootings and drug overdose rate. If you're saying, oh, we just need more police officers everywhere. Down here is police per 100,000 people aligned with school shootings per state. No. There is no correlation between any of these. But you know what does correlate to school shootings every single time? Firstly, here are all the states with firearm preemption laws. If you don't know what those are, essentially firearm preemption laws are laws that stop cities within certain states from making stricter firearm legislation than the states already have. The states with firearm preemption laws have school shootings at almost 3 times the rate of states who don't. Will creating access to mental health care help? Sure. Will increasing wages and decreasing poverty help? Sure. But what is the way to prevent school shootings that we know for a fact works within our country's legislation? Firearm legislation. It works every single time in every single country and every single state that it's been tried.
Everytown Research refers to itself as a, quote, movement of nearly 10 million mayors, teachers, survivors, and gun owners, students, and everyday Americans. And it says, when it comes to gun law strength, these states are national leaders, these states are making progress, and these states are national failures. Not only that, but when looking at each state's gun violence rates, there's at least a correlation between laws and crime, with outliers being New Mexico, Nevada, and Colorado. Everytown ranks California as having the best gun laws. This is corroborated by Giffords Law Center, an organization dedicated to saving lives from gun violence, led by former Congressperson Gabrielle Giffords, who assigns letter grades per state for gun law strength. For instance, California has an A, Massachusetts and Hawaii have A minuses. Let's see what those 3 states do well. Here's what laws they have in common, including universal background checks, domestic violence gun laws, and extreme risk protection orders, just to name a few. And as is being shown, some states can do more. So there's that versus what the likes of Mississippi and Louisiana are lacking. According to Bloomberg, in fact, 3 types of restrictions are most effective, individually and in combination, in reducing the overall homicide rate. They are universal background checks, bans on violent offenders purchasing guns, and may issue laws, which give police discretion in issuing concealed carry permits. A study tracked the effects of 10 gun laws on gun deaths between 1991 and 2016, while controlling for factors like gun ownership, the overall violent crime rate, excluding homicide, alcohol use, unemployment, poverty rate, and density at the state level, all of which affect the rate of gun deaths. And an analysis the researchers did in a related policy brief shows that gun control restrictions work even better when they are enacted in combination. States with all 3 of those most effective measures had homicide rates that were 36% lower. States with 2 of these measures had 13% lower rates, and those with just 1 had 6% lower rates. So, the proof in gun laws helping and working is in homicide rates and firearm mortality rates across states. Third Way agrees. In their study, they collected homicide data from the year 2000 through 2020 for all 50 states. They found that the murder rate in Trump voting states had exceeded the murder rate in Biden voting states every year this century. Altogether, overall murder rates since 2000 were on average 23% higher in Trump voting states. For the past 21 years, the top 10 murder rate states have been dominated by reliably red states. Even when they removed the county with the largest city in Trump voting states and kept them in for Biden voting states, murder rates were still significantly higher in these red states. Oh, Trump voting states versus Biden voting states represent a 25-25 split. Quick tangent, someone watching this will still have something to say about liberal-led cities having worse crime. Well, 62 of the 100 largest cities in America have Democrat mayors, meaning there's kind of only blue cities in America. And large cities have violent crime issues. Jacksonville, the biggest city with a Republican mayor, does too. Even with that, here's the safest cities in America and the most dangerous cities in America per Forbes. Go through each of these lists to see which city is led by which mayor. And since only 5 states don't have preemption laws, why blame cities? And yes, red states lack necessary gun laws, so they have a bigger murder problem and firearm mortality problem in particular than blue states. State to state, if it wasn't for various gun laws, how else could we explain the variance in violent gun crime and homicide rates? So, what is a GOP mayor going to do about a city's crime? The same thing that a GOP governor is going to do about state's crime? Nothing. Yo. I've said this before and I can't stress this enough. If you're going to mention black people's crime adding up, like in Chicago, then you need to talk about something else in addition to that.
This comment refers to the correlation, and it is just that, a correlation only, that black people commit more homicides in the United States of America. The reason that we know it's just a correlation is because people have actually done research on the topic. Fancy that! You control for poverty, and in particular the concentration of poverty, as well as for inequality between neighborhoods. Observed difference between white and black homicide rates basically disappears entirely. In other words, almost the entire variation between those two groups can be accounted for just because of poverty levels, the concentration of poverty, and the inequality in the neighborhoods where those two groups live. Now I wonder, might there be any historical explanations for why African Americans in this country tend to be more impoverished, and why that poverty tends to be more concentrated, and why inequality between white and black communities tends to be the greatest? Particularly in the American South, where homicide rates are higher across the board for all racial groups.
Concentrated poverty. We should do something about that. Mental health concerns too. This applies to every city, every race. It's amazing how we don't want to discuss the root cause of issues and rates when it comes to guns and crime. Embarrassing. But state laws seem to matter most. For what it's worth, Illinois has an A for gun law strength. More murder is committed in Chicago, a liberal-run city, the most corrupt in the US, and where 1 of 5 of its guns used in homicide comes from Indiana, than there is in Indy, because Chicago has 2.5 times the amount of people. If Indianapolis had the same amount of people there as Chicago does, and their rate of homicide remained the same, it would be considered a war zone too. Indiana's gun law strength is an F. Indiana's homicide rate, though, is under Illinois recently, though, so, hey. With all of that said, if a politician or pundit says, remember, an armed society is a polite society, loosen the harsh gun laws and lower the crime rate, they're lying. They don't want to do anything about the multiple gun problems we have in America. And while much of this video discussed murder and homicide, a state's gun laws could also help with suicide, in addition to school shootings and mass shootings. Until somebody proves otherwise, my thoughts and prayers goes towards better gun laws. We gonna be all right.